got some incredible economic news right now, and it's funny because I was sure the media and the Democrats and all the geniuses in New York and DC told us that what's happening today would never happen. You know, all the smarties, all the brilliant minds that know everything there is to know about an economy, they told us that Trump was ruining the world's economy and certainly the American economy and ruining your 401k. You might want to take a look because, well, it's a pretty exciting day right now. Also, we were told that the Biden economy was really fantastic, that Trump had actually inherited a really strong economy with huge record breaking job growth, right? Remember all of that? Well, it turns out that we've got some new numbers that suggest that all of it was a fraud. We'll show you a little bit more on that, but we'll start with Abby Phillip last night, of all people, who was forced to report on the fact that all those Biden job numbers weren't quite what they appeared to be.
Tonight, did Donald Trump inherit a weaker economy than everyone thought? Well, a revised labor report shows that the economy added nearly 1 million fewer jobs than initially estimated for that year ending in March. Now, that is the biggest revision since 2009.
Yeah, it sure is. That's gigantic. And by the way, it comes on the heels of last year's revision that was about 7 or 800,000 jobs. It's remarkable, but this doesn't make any sense because just a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump fired the person who was in charge of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because all of the jobs numbers kept getting reported incorrectly and all the numbers were being revised down. And I was sure all of the experts and geniuses told us that this person in charge of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that they were competent, they were great, they were brilliant, and Trump only fired her because he was unhappy with the numbers that were coming in. You know, I'm mad at this report. I want the numbers to be better, so I'm just going to fire somebody because they tell us he's a temperamental, idiotic jerk, right? Remember all of that? Yeah, I'm sure you do. In fact, here was a conversation about that very thing on MSNBC just a couple of weeks ago.
If you're going to take BLS data, if you're going to say jobs numbers, we're just not going to release them, or you're going to change or corrupt the inflation data, that will come into conflict with what people are experiencing, Justin.
More than that, it will come in conflict with what they get. Remember that, if Trump's tariffs cause inflation, and there's already signs that they are, that's going to undermine the purchasing power of seniors. Now, fortunately, our Social Security system says we index, which is to say adjust Social Security to take account of inflation. Now, what happens if he imposes those tariffs, they raise the cost of living, and he instructs the head of the BLS, because it's very uncomfortable to admit that inflation was high, instead to construct some other measure which gives us lower inflation? What that does is constructs a new economic reality in which seniors won't get the cost of living adjustments that they need. Mm-hmm. The thing is, these statistics are embedded in our society in ways that many of us do not immediately imagine, but we're all served by them being accurate. And they do things like adjust the cost of living. We have trillions of dollars in bonds that are tied to them and so on.
Yeah, I love it when people with an Australian accent are lecturing me about how our economy is supposed to work and how the transparency in our government and accuracy in our government works. But he does make a good point. These numbers, whether it's the jobs numbers or whether it's the inflation numbers, they are embedded in so many aspects of how our economy works, how our government functions, how Social Security inflation adjusted raises are calculated, and how businesses and government are supposed to make projected estimates for their growth based on what job numbers in the economy are looking at. So they're making the point that we need to have accuracy from these government institutions that are supposed to provide us valid numbers. That conversation you just saw came on the heels of Trump firing the person who was in charge of the unemployment numbers at BLS, and their hair was on fire because, well, Trump's just going to cook the books. Trump's just going to put someone in there to lie to us. We need these numbers to be accurate. Yeah, we need the numbers to be accurate. That's why that person got fired. And now here we are today with yet another adjustment down of 900,000 jobs that they got wrong, all during Biden's final year, all during the campaign year. 900 plus thousand jobs that they overreported right when Joe Biden was running for re-election. Steve Moore, economist at Heritage Foundation, has actually looked at the last several years of revisions that have been done going back to 2022. The last 3 benchmark revisions, 1.766 million jobs down. The monthly revisions going back to January of 2022, an additional 1.83 million jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics over the course of the last 3 years with their benchmark revisions and their monthly revisions have been off by close to 3 million jobs all during the Biden presidency. And yet we were told when Trump fired this person because of obvious incompetence that he was the problem. And yet, even with all of that, today's consumer price index number came in, and I'm going to let CNBC tell you exactly what it looks like.
PPI, wholesale inflation for August, expected to be up 0.3. No. Down 0.1%. Down 0.1. Wow. That would be the first negative number since April of this year when it was minus 0.2. If you strip out food and energy, we're also expecting up 0.3. It's minus 0.1 as well. Minus 0.1, the same. Last time we had a minus number was April, and we're comping to minus 0.2 in April. And I do want to point out, last month we had up 0.9 on both those variables. They were the highest going back to March of 22. They just were revised slightly lower to 0.7, so 0.7% for each of those in the rearview mirror for July. Now let's look at ex-food, energy, and trade. Finally, as expected, up 0.3, which follows up 0.6, unrevised at this point. Up 0.3 would actually be the smallest going back to 0 in June of this year. Now the year over year, in my opinion, these are the most important. And boy, I'm surprised. Real progress here. 2.6 on year over year headline. We are expecting 3.3 in the rearview mirror, 3.3. 2.6 will be the lowest since it was 2.4 in June, and it underscores whether it was tariff driven or not. Those little blips seem to be moving back into the sunset. Year over year ex-food energy, 2.8%. That's core 2.8, expecting 3.5. In the rearview mirror, a whopping 3.7. 2.8 would equate to the smallest since June of this year, but that was the smallest going all the way back to April of 24.
So in case you missed all of that, let me just say, great news across the board on inflation and price index at every single level, either beating expectations. In many cases, they were expecting an increase of 0.3 of a point. It actually went down 0.1 of a point in many factors. The very worst that happened was that the expected rate of increase on food and fuel ended up matching exactly what was anticipated, an increase in 0.3. Nothing but good news on inflation numbers. And see, here's where I'm confused, because all these geniuses, all of the people who know way better than Donald Trump, because, Donald Trump's just a reality TV star. What does he know? They all told us that right now we would be suffering from outrageous inflation because we're several months into the president's tariffs policies. And yet the opposite has happened. What the hell is going on here? Well, we had a lot of people, and I got to say, in the business sector, you see something you don't often ever see from CNN, MSNBC, the broadcast networks, the people who read teleprompters, who have very nice haircuts and report on the economy. They're wrong a lot, and they're often wrong because they have a bias, but you can't fudge numbers. And one thing I want to say about the people who work on the business networks, when they're wrong, they cop to it. They admit it, because that goes to their credibility. When you work at MSNBC or CNN and ABC, you're wrong. Oh, please. Being on the left means never having to say you're sorry. You just move on. You just move on to the next outrage. They never keep a toll. But in the business, financial news world, you got to cop to when you were wrong. And these guys, I got to hand it to them. They're admitting they were wrong. Watch this.
There's the exporter, there's the importer, and there's the consumer. Mm-hmm. And so far, the consumer is carrying the least of the burden. I can tell you what's going on right now in companies is they're going product by product, going through the elasticities, what they think the consumer can absorb in terms of price increase without destroying demand. And they're finding out that they cannot pass through as much of the price increase as they want.
Did you catch that? Do you remember when everyone said a tariff is a tax and the American consumer is going to have to pay those tariff taxes? So this is going to be a problem because it's a government policy that increases the price of things passed on to the consumer, and that means that we'll have more inflation. Did you catch what he just said? Sector by sector by sector, businesses and industries who were paying these tariffs have had to factor out how much of those tariffs they can pass on to the consumer and still be able to sell their product or sell their service that's been tariffed. And for the most part, they've decided to absorb these costs. They've decided one way or the other, it's better to do that than increase prices on those goods or products or services. In other words, the businesses are paying it and not passing it on to the consumer. Now, you may be angry about that because you own stock in those businesses. And if they're not making as much profit because of the tariffs, that's going to affect the stock price or it's going to affect how they hire people. But so far, we haven't seen any of that either. And certainly the initial effects of those tariffs, we haven't seen in one bit. And by the way, while all of that is going on with the economy and do you see all the green on the screen with the markets? While all of that is going on, the government treasury is bringing in more money through tariffs, where we've had a couple of months now where we've been operating at a surplus instead of the deficits that we've had for several years. And even more so, Trump has been able to use these tariffs and the threats of more tariffs to be able to negotiate better trade deals with these countries and even use them to leverage, in Europe certainly, better policies with regard to NATO and military spending by those countries. In other words, Trump's been right. Scott Bessent's been right. Lutnick's been right. Rubio's been right. And to watch all of the people on the business morning shows today admit to this has been amazing. Here's the CEO of Wells Fargo, who, again, months ago was screaming from the rooftops that the economy was about to descend into the lower depths of hell.
In our own data, things are remarkably stable. I mean, we look at, I know you guys have talked about it this morning and other times, consumer spend continues at the same year-over-year pace across almost all wealth levels. Consumer credit is as good as it's been in the last 6 months. In fact, it's probably trending a touch better. Companies are in really great shape. We look at signs for any kind of change, and you just don't see it. Having said that, there is this big dichotomy between higher income and lower income consumers, which continues and is a real issue. And when you look at just the overall data in terms of jobs, it's undeniable in terms of just job creation. So, yeah, things are actually feel very good today, certainly relative to what you think they could be.
That's right. And regarding jobs, by the way, the job creation has all been for American workers. If anyone has lost their jobs, and there have been job losses over the course of the last several months, but almost all of them have been either government workers or non-citizen workers, most of whom were in the country illegally, which, by the way, last I checked, is exactly what Donald Trump proposed for this economy and promised for this economy. The good news just kept on coming. Look at all that green. Look at all those up arrows here in the futures right before the markets opened a couple of hours ago.
You're on set with me. You had quite a reaction to this number, and Lauren pointing out, look at the market. Market turned around.
I've been fist pumping, and people couldn't see me doing it, but I'm doing it now. This is fantastic news. Producer prices much lower than we thought. So I actually, as it turns out, am wrong, and I'm thrilled I'm wrong, because I thought we were going to see some of the inflation data, or rather some of the tariff impact in this inflation data. We haven't seen it. 2.6% was the PPI. We thought it was going to be 3.3. Cheryl, this is just such wonderful news. I'm thrilled. And it also means, we're getting a rate cut in a week.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You think things are good right now. Just wait until we get that rate cut. That should hopefully help the real estate market. It might help the refinance market and allow businesses who were planning on ramping up manufacturing in America to be able to purchase more equipment and more manufacturing facilities at lower interest rates as they finance those investments in the American worker and American manufacturing. don't mean to be too much of a cheerleader here. I'm just telling you that after week after week after week of naysayers, of negativity, of people telling you that Trump is ruining our economy, so far, they've all been wrong. And it's kind of fun to see them sort of cop to it and say, wow, I'm surprised, but this is good. Objectively speaking, this is good news. Let's circle back real fast, if we could, in Jen Psaki fashion, about those Biden job numbers and what a disaster this adjustment has been about the overcounted jobs during the Biden presidency. Fox News summed it up pretty brilliantly yesterday.
There's new economic data that just came out a few moments ago, and it shows the U.S. job market was much weaker than thought back in 2024. Edward Lawrence is live from the White House, and so this number was eye-popping. So what does it mean about the situation that we're in now?
Yeah, it really was. And this is a preliminary benchmark revision, and it was down 911,000 jobs.
That's right. In other words, 911,000 jobs. In other words, the Biden economy was fraudulent. The Biden jobs numbers that they all kept repeating over and over again. When you were sitting there and you were seeing the prices at the supermarkets and you knew people who had lost their jobs and had never been able to get rehired, when you knew how bad the economy was, and Biden and Karine Jean-Pierre and Kamala Harris and everybody on cable and broadcast news kept telling you, you're stupid, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about. It's the strongest economy on the planet. This is the greatest job growth we've had in American history. And you knew it wasn't true. And you were right. It was all bullshit. Whether it was intentional bullshit or whether they're just incompetent in delivering the jobs numbers, either way, you were lied to. One other thing about the economy right now and how prices are really stabilizing. We told you this during the campaign, and we told you right after the president took office that his executive orders with regard to gas and oil exploration and drilling and refining in the United States of America would be the single most important pivot point for inflation and prices in our economy, because everything relies on fuel. And Joe Biden eliminated all of our domestic oil and gas production and new exploration. He stopped pipelines from being utilized, and he put us back onto the world market, forcing Europe to purchase from Russia that fueled their tanks and their war machines so that they could invade Ukraine. The bad decisions followed bad decisions followed bad decisions. It made gas and oil prices skyrocket in this country, and it was a huge factor with regard to inflation in America. Well, we came off the summer Labor Day weekend just last week, and lo and behold, as gas and oil prices have been climbing year over year over year, and the summer is always the most expensive time for fuel prices. Take a look at this report from last week.
Guess what? The prices are going back down. And there's good reason to believe, Steve, especially now that we're getting away from the summer and some of the mixed fuels, that could keep going in the right direction. Your thought?
There you go. All the gas prices came down. And this was as of Labor Day weekend, when usually the summer brings higher gas prices. So here's what I'm confused about. And maybe you can help me out. Maybe you can explain this to me, because I'm not a genius about this stuff. I'm just like you. I'm just a regular American who observes the news, observes information, and tries to make it all make sense. And hopefully our daily conversation helps you make sense of it too. Here's what I'm confused about. You see, I've been told who all the geniuses are in Washington, D.C. and on television. I've been told who all the people in the Senate and Congress and all the people who really know way more than you do. You know, the people who are like Harvard professors and, you know, people like, like Elizabeth Warren, for instance. These people who were geniuses, who have forgotten more about economics than we'll ever know, and who deride and criticize and ridicule Donald Trump. For what does he know? He's a reality TV star. He built casinos. He doesn't know anything. Well, this is the sort of thing that the geniuses like Elizabeth Warren were saying about the president's policies and the economy not too long ago.
You know, keep in mind, Caitlin, that many economists, in fact, the majority, have said either we are headed into a recession or we are already in a recession.
Yeah. See, we've got a GDP of over 3%. We've got prices down. We've got just job market stabilizing. The tariffs are taking hold. And I don't get it. Can you figure this out? I thought she was the smart one. We've got a recession coming, she says. And look at her. I mean, she's wearing the glasses. She's got the haircut. Not to mention those high Native American cheekbones. Clearly, she knows more than you or I or that buffoon Donald Trump. Or what about these three? I mean, just look at them. They're brilliant. They know more about the economy than you do. And what were they just saying about it?
I think that he lied. He lied to people and said that he was going to bring down costs on day one. And the reality is that that is not at all what he's done. His tariffs, his unhinged tariff policy has raised prices for everyday Americans on everything that they need to survive.
Yeah, unhinged tariff policies raise prices on everything that you need to survive. And yet today's numbers don't seem to bear that out. I don't know. Again, I don't know these things. I'm just a stupid radio host and streamer, podcaster, and used to work on Broadway musicals. What the hell do I know about this stuff? These people are smarter than me, and they're certainly smarter than you. Maybe you can tell me. Go ahead and let us know in the comment section about why you think they got it wrong, because they're usually so smart about this stuff, aren't they? Yeah. Help us out.